YouTube, what is going on? Chris with Journos, Comics and Pop Culture. I got another video diving into some comic book goodness today, guys. We're talking about CGC again here. So I just want to say thank you to my subscribers and my viewers that leave awesome comments that allow me to keep producing content because you guys help inspire content. So today's video is actually inspired by a comment that just stated some awesome dialogue that just poses more talking points, especially regarding CGC. So we're gonna dive into this, okay? So thank you to this viewer for leaving this comment. A lot of good stuff that I agree with, a lot of good things that I might not agree with, but like I said, this is why we talk about these things. So let's go into the first talking point, guys, and I'm going to read what this individual was talking about. Maybe not word for word here, but let's dive into this. And why I dive into this, I'm gonna have you guys watch my comic book room tour video. You guys can go check that out. Find the original video. There's going to be no volume, but just for something awesome to watch, why I'm talking about the CGC topic. So, as that rolls, let's discuss, guys. All right, so this individual starts discussing about how at one point in time, pressing and cleaning books wasn't looked at as a feasible thing to keep the value of the book or the grade of the book at that, blue label level, right? Um, but they do state, and I say, quote, they would the press books would sneak through their grading process. People would crack open slabs, press books, and resubmit the book to get the higher grade. CGC, I guess, caught on to this, and the individual states that they bought out this company. There was a company that used to press and clean. So they bought them out and allowed now these cleaning services to be acceptable for books that aren't considered, restored. Now, the individual in the comment does state this. They state that CGC bought out the company and changed the industry standard, allowing books to now be repaired, cleaned, and charge you for a service that they previously had a problem detecting. Well, let me just clarify something here. Books are not allowed to be repaired and get a blue label. If they are repaired, they are restored, and that is still a purple label. Now, what's the definition of repairing? I think we have to separate pressing and cleaning from being repaired. I think we have to understand that. Industry standard pressing and cleaning is not considered repairing a book. So maybe that's just how we're looking at the definition of the term there. Now, moving on, um, the individual states in his comment, comics are only worth what someone is willing to pay for them. Grading services should be universal. A 9.4 CGC should be a 9.4 PGX. This is another great talking point I'm going to dive into here. A nicer label shouldn't make hundreds of dollars difference in value. Now, I'm going to disagree with that, and I'm going to show you guys why. But once again, the grading is subjective, just as if they were raw, unslabbed books. Differences in professional grading destroys the entire idea of having professional grading. But if people keep telling someone their snake oil is the best, they start believing it. Okay, so I don't completely agree with this individual, but I love the fact that they left this comment, and I appreciate them so much. So we're going to dive into the first thing that he talks about a little more, and that's pressing and cleaning and what that means for the industry, okay? Maybe at one point in time, it was looked down upon to press and clean a book. Now, I don't know if at one point in the lifespan of CGC, maybe 20 years ago, that if they saw that a book was pressed and cleaned, that they gave it a purple label, or they deemed it not certified like a blue label is today. I don't know that, but I will say one thing. The fact that the industry has changed and allows uh, cleaning and pressing to still allow a book to get a certified grade, I support that 100%. And here's the problem with that. And like I think the individual even stated here, it's hard to detect. How are you gonna allow somebody to say, well, I think that this book was pressed, or I think that this book was cleaned. Therefore, as a quote unquote professional grading company, I'm going to ding this book. I'm going to lower the grade, or I'm going to lower the value of it by noting that this book has been pressed, or I'm going to give it a purple label. If you don't really know and you can't differentiate from one book to the next, right? So I think that's just the evolution of the industry and of the market, and I back it up 100%. Restoration is completely different. If we know that there's color touching done, if we know that there's been glue or something on it, that has allowed or restapling or anything like that. And I don't even know if restapling will actually get a restored label. I'm not too sure about that, but I like the fact that your restoration is completely different than pressing and cleaning. I do. I support it 100%. It's evolved and I'm fine with that. Now, let's move on. This is the bulk of what I want to talk about today. And that's what this individual talks about in terms of a universal grading system. And I'm going to repeat here, guys. They say that comics are only worth what someone is willing to pay for them, which means that grading services should be universal. A 9.4 CGC should be the same as a 9.4 PGX. Okay. I agree with this at base. I agree with this at base. Now, there's no way, it's just like an umpire of a baseball game, okay? Or referees of a football game or a basketball game. They are professionals. They have strict guidelines on what they should call, especially for baseball, balls and strikes. You know where the strike zone should be. With instant replay and with having the strike zone box shown on the TV, it eliminates human error. But there's always going to be room for that human error or that subjectivity, right? But with grading, what I think this individual is saying, we don't even have this set strict rule of law here from companies like CGC to PGX to CBCS. We don't have that. There's no transparency, and I've talked about this before. I don't believe that each book is going to be so easily a 9.4 every time with every book, with every grader at CGC, or with every company's PGX or CBCS. But the fact that a book can go one day and be a 9.6 and come back another day and be a 9.0, to me, that's too much margin of error. It really is. So to this individual's point, I do think there needs to be an industry standard. And if not an industry standard, at least a transparent, publicly made standard for each company. Okay? And I do believe, and then don't mark my word by this, but I do believe there's some companies out there that use the certified grading scale that's published by Overstreet. It's the Overstreet grading scale. I don't know if it was PGX that says that they utilize this or CBCS. I don't know off the top of my head. But at least if they are using that, we have some idea of what that standard is. CGC, we have no idea what their standard is. We have no idea whatsoever. That means we're giving them the power to have one grader go in one day and grade a book a 9.8, and we could send that same back the next day and have a different grader in, or have the same grader come back and grade that book a 9.4. That's wrong. When the idea that a 9.6 to a 9.8 in some books can add hundreds of dollars in value, or even at some books thousands of dollars more in value. What did I say for a Hulk 181? I believe a 9.6 goes for, what did I say? Close to 10,000, when a 9.8 is close to 18,000. That's almost doubled in value. That's $7,000 to $8,000 more in value that you add by one tier grade up. And for grading from these certified grading companies to still be so subjective and based on an opinion is wrong. It is wrong. Now, like I said, I don't believe it's ever going to be a point where every book for every company, if it's a 9.4, it should always be a 9.4. There's always going to be a small room for or margin of error, but it shouldn't be what it is because there's just no transparency at all. CGC, we need transparency. CGC, we need to know the standard. And we need to demand that as customers. Now, if we keep giving CGC our business, they don't need to change anything. We as the consumers have the power, the purchasing power to demand change in any kind of business model, any kind of business entity on how they are handling business, quality control, all of that stuff. So it is, as long as CGC is cocky and confident that they can remain on top and control market shares of the grading industry, they're not going to be transparent with their grading system and how they actually grade their books. Has anybody seen the inside of CGC and has actually seen where the books are processed and go to the grading station and to where they get slabbed and all that? Nobody's seen it. I mean, I've seen the inside factories of Coca-Cola bottling stations, the Jelly Belly station, and Ford, the manufacturing. So like we see the process in many of these things. We have not seen that process or even know anything about that process. That's a problem. It is a problem. So, you know, it goes into, let's move on with what this individual stated. They went on to saying, this is where I disagree 100%. A nicer label shouldn't make hundreds of dollars difference in value. I'm going to disagree 100% on that. A nicer label has nothing to do with the grade. As we're looking at the books on screen, how ironic. CGC, a part of slabbing is aesthetics. It is. It's the case, the clarity of the case, the feel of the case, the aesthetics of the label. And as you can see here, those were the new CGC labels. They're clean. I didn't show off some of the older labels or the CBCS labels, but look, this is about the free market. Going back to this, I'm going to repeat it. What did you say? A nicer label shouldn't make hundreds of dollars different in value. It should if the consumer and the market demands it. And that's just a fact of the matter. And that has nothing to do with this other subject that we touched upon about transparency in the grading process, okay? And inconsistency in the grading process. That's a whole nother thing. When we talk about labels and the aesthetics of a nice label, look, if I like the way that a certain name brand pair of glasses looks next to a $5 pair of glasses, I'm gonna pay $200 for Ray-Bans next to a $5 to $10 Walmart brand because they look better. Why do you think people buy name brand stuff? It's not necessarily even better quality, but it just may look better because of branding. CGC has owned it, man, and I give them credit. Their branding, their aesthetics of their slab and their labeling is clean. It looks better. It looks better. So that brand recognition, that was grown organically by CGC. CGC's old slabs were garbage. They were horrible. They looked like the old PGX slabs, but they evolved. Okay? PGX has evolved. Their new labels look so much better and they look more similar to the CGC labels. And the ones I would never buy a PGX book simply because of how horrible their labels were. I don't care if they were charging me $5 to slab it. I still wouldn't send them any of my books just because of that. CBCS has decent labels. They just updated their labels and their slabs, and they look great. And I think that's going to hopefully bring them some more business. So this is healthy competition here when you talk about the labeling system. Okay? I might send some books off to EGS, which is an up and coming grading service, and they do this custom labeling where they can color coordinate with the book that you're sending in, and their slabbing cases might not be as professional, might not look good in terms of a slab as a CGC label, but just because of their custom labels, they look great, and it might not pull a higher value on the market for resale value, but I might send a book in just because I don't want to sell it and I want it to look cool with a color coordinated label. So there you go. So they have a niche market going for themselves with these custom labels. It's all about aesthetics, guys. And if somebody has a 9.0 in an Amazing Spider-Man 300 and a 9.0 a CGC, and then they have an Amazing Spider-Man 300 and a 9.0 and a PGX, or even a CBCS, and they're willing to pay $50 to $75 more for that same graded book in a CGC just because they like the case or the label or the aesthetics of the book, that's they have the power to do so on the free market, to spend more money for what appeals to them. So that's my statement regarding that piece. Um, moving on now. Let's see. Once again, the grading is subjective. Now we're back to the subjectivity of the grading. Just as if they were raw, unslabbed books. Differences in professional grading destroys the entire idea of having it professionally graded in the first place. But if people keep telling someone their snake oil is the best, they start to believe it. Well, that last line about the snake oil, CGC is the best, not because they're telling us they're the best. CGC is the best because we as consumers see them as the best for whatever reason. Whether it's that we trust their grading, even though we don't know what goes on behind doors, or it's because of the aesthetics. We like the feel of the clear case. We like the labels, or it has something to do with their signature series, or whatever it may be, or whether they just built that name brand because they've been around for 20 years. Okay, so nobody's telling us that they're the best. They might be, obviously. I'm not saying that they're not, but ultimately what I'm saying by saying that nobody's telling us the best is we have autonomous rule over ourselves to make the decision on who we want to go to. Okay, but I'm going to go back to this other point where I kind of agree with this individual as well. If this grading is so subjective, and it's basically just as subjective as a raw unslabbed book, then differences in professional grading destroys the entire idea of having professionally graded in the first place. And again, I agree. I agree. If I can send my book to CGC on one day and it get a 9.2, and the next day I get a 9.8, what's the point? Right? What's the point? If one day I could send my Hulk 181, and one day it gets a 6.0, and the next day it gets an 8.0, what's the point? The validity of these grades and the value that's inherited and the value that is supposedly given on the secondary market is on eggshells here. It's on eggshells. Because if more people, in this, well, this is where I kind of get what he's saying about if somebody keeps telling you the snake oil is the best. It's like, this is where if we get so hung up on the grade itself and not the label, or we choose CGC because of the label, we choose CGC, we are willing to pay more for CGC because of the label or because of the slab. If we're willing to pay more because we do think that their grading service is the best, but there's still this much inconsistency, if people start really calling this out, it's going to be problematic on the secondary market. It could, if a majority of collectors start exposing this and start stating like, look, the fact that we don't have transparency in the grading process and that the inconsistency level of subjectivity is so wide and is so large, what does that mean? It means that those thousands of dollars difference between a 9.6 and a 9.8 mean nothing. And then people could stop paying that top notch or top tier value that comes along with the 9.8. People are going to say, look, I don't trust CGC anymore, so I'm not going to pay $7,000 more for a 9.8 Hulk 181. I'm going to go ahead and pay $7,000 less to stick with that 9.6 because as far as I know, that 9.6 could be a 9.8 tomorrow. That's the problem. So, like I said, guys, we could talk about this till we're blue in the face when it comes to these issues with the subjectivity. I think the subjectivity is something that this grading market needs to change, not just CBC, but all of the companies. And we as consumers need to hold them accountable. Otherwise, it's not going to change. This is something that I will keep talking about months and months and years into the future. I will, but I'll leave this video with that, guys. I really appreciated the comment. Like I said, there was a few things that we dove into, a few things I kind of gave context to, a few things that I agree with, a few things that I slightly disagree with, but ultimately appreciate the comment. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. To the viewer, thanks again for leaving this comment. Such great content. Thank you guys for watching. And until next time.